Welcome to the Achieve Workplace Culture podcast, where Wendy, Chris, and Eric explore the latest news stories, their work, and trends for creating and maintaining a healthy workplace culture.
Hey, well, welcome to the Achieve Workplace Culture podcast, where we talk about all things related to workplace culture and leadership and the connection between the two of those things. I'm Eric Stutzman, and I'm here with my good friends Chris Downey and Wendy Lowen. We work together and we talk together, and we like to think a lot about how to make great workplaces. That's what this podcast is about. In each episode of the podcast, we take a look at a trend or an article or something hot in the news related to workplace culture. And lately, we've been hearing a lot from people about labor shortages, people talking about their struggles to find or keep good employees. And it's got us thinking, and so we want to address that question today. Are there really labor shortages, or is that a myth? Or even if there is, what can you do about it as an employer so that you can attract and retain and keep the best people? And we think it might have something to do with workplace culture, so we're going to explore that. So why don't we dig in? We had some really vigorous conversation as the cameras were getting set up this morning, the mics were getting set up this morning about, is there a labor shortage or is there not a labor shortage? And I'm just going to lay it out there. When I did some research, I look at the unemployment rates in the U.S. and Canada. In the United States, it's about 3.9%. In Canada, it's about 5.8%. It's not really much different than it was a year ago, and yet I'm hearing more people talk about labor shortages even than a year ago. But I don't know. There's still some people looking for work. Is there a labor shortage? What do you think?
Well, as soon as you started talking, Eric, I wrote down shortages in like air quotes. I think a better word would be labor vacancies. Yes, there are industries that absolutely have large rates of vacancies. They're continually looking for labor, but whether that is actually a shortage of labor, I think that is up for deliberation. I think there's research on both sides that says, yes, there is a shortage. And then there's a lot of research that says, well, actually, no, there is not a shortage. It has to do with some other factors. It might be government austerity. It might be employers who want to keep wages low. And I think it also has to do with culture. But I think we need to be careful about this, I want to use the word myth around labor shortages. Is it true?
I want to put you on the hot seat here, Wendy. I love that distinction between vacancy and shortage. I think we're going to dive into that. What do you think? Do you think there is a labor shortage?
No, I personally do not.
Okay.
I mean, you look at the numbers, there are people to fill the jobs.
Right.
And if you look at, there is skilled labor and there is unskilled labor. We've, historically made that distinction. There's also a lot of research that says it doesn't matter what the industry is. There isn't a shortage. There are other systemic issues that are playing into it.
Right.
Whether that's, like I said, government austerity, employers who don't want to pay more for particular roles. And then I think culture does play into it, but I don't think we can negate some of the feeders to the idea.
It's pretty interesting because I frequently hear employers say things like, well, I'd like to expand, but I just can't find the right people. I can't find the skilled people I need, or I can't attract the right people. I hear that all the time.
I can't find good people.
I can't find good people.
I can't find good people.
Okay, yes. So I can't find good people, but you're looking, the industries that we're talking about, especially that we hear a lot about in the news, are hospitality, service industries, construction.
Healthcare.
Healthcare. And I think if we look at those industries, there might be different factors that are contributing. For sure. But is there an actual shortage of people to do the work? No, I don't think so. So you think about hospitality. What skill level does it take to pour a cup of coffee and to figure it out? And I know from my own children who are looking for jobs in the summer, saying what's happening is this idea of queuing. So it's for a relatively straightforward job, pouring coffee at a coffee shop, and they're looking at people for particular degrees for that. So people, they call it queuing up. So they're looking at the distinguishing markers in a resume and going, oh, we're going to hire from the top and work our way down. Whereas I think there's people, there's a lineup. If you don't want to pay for the role, there are some industries that might actually have to shift the way that they provide their services and how they remunerate.
Are you saying that in a coffee shop they're looking for somebody with like a bachelor's degree
Oh
to pour
yeah,
coffee?
sometimes, yeah. They call it like queuing for a job. You know, they get a bunch of resumes in. And think about some of the, larger organizations are starting to realize we need to match the actual skill set with these new ways of working and innovating and collaborating. Yes, there are some, certification and degrees, absolutely. That's the entry level. But there are other things at play that have to do with skills that actually can be taught in the workplace as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think just on what I'm hearing, I want to go back to what you said before, Wendy, about vacancies versus shortage. I agree. I don't see, and Eric just quoted some stats, there's not less people out looking for work. No. It's not, I think it's a convenient and maybe, dare I say, a lazy answer to say it's a labor shortage. We do have an issue with vacancy, though. I think that's what we need to.
Yes.
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
And I think the answer is going to be different depending on the industry.
100%. Yeah.
In the construction industry, some of what I've read suggests that one of the issues is you have an aging workforce who are retiring and retiring quickly.
Yeah.
And not enough young people entering the skilled trades in construction. Is that a policy problem? Is it a perception problem that this isn't necessarily a great place to work? I should be working in tech. So I'm not going to go for construction. Is it I don't know, is it a wage issue? Is it like, I'd rather work in tech and make X amount of money versus working on a construction site and working this amount of money? So are there people out there? We know there are people looking for work, right? But the construction industry might face a different set of barriers around their vacancies than, say, technology, which also, by the way, says they have shortage.
Yes, I'm sure there's nuance to those barriers, but we've talked about this before. Everyone in every industry are people. Yeah. Are people getting what they need out of work? I think that's the commonality here. And I have a thought on this, and it is this. One of the things Gallup's kind of state of work report just came out for 2024. And this came from looking at 2023 data, but looking at 2024 data confirms this. Engagement in actually worldwide is actually higher than it's been since Gallup started recording back in the 90s, tracking this. Wow. Right? I've said it myself, engagement's an all-time low. It's not. It's actually at record highs. Now, it's still low. Now, in Canada and the US, people that are fully engaged is 33%. That's still low. It's a huge opportunity. But we go back to the 90s, engagement was like 13 or 14%. So what we now have is a more engaged workforce. And what I believe, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, is that employees now, or potential employees, have more choice than they've ever had. And they're making decisions around where they work based off what's meaningful or is purpose-driven for them, right? So in the past, employees had to just take whatever was given to them and suffer through it, hence the low engagement. But now there's choice. Yeah. And we're seeing high engagement. And I think that's different. I think the workforce, we're seeing vacancies because people are making choices. And I think whether you're in construction, whether you're in hospitality, whether you're in tech, you're in healthcare, we need to make where we work attractive so that someone can come. I think that's really at the root of it. I think people have choice. They should have choice. Yeah. But it's going to require organizations to think differently about what they offer.
I think we're flipping the conversation that employees have knowledge, they have choice, and they have expectations, and they should.
Right. Yeah.
And the mirror has been the other way. Yeah. Where it's about, as the employer, we have, knowledge. We're going to make the decisions and we set the expectations.
Yeah.
But this is a reciprocal relationship, and
Yes.
it should be a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah, I like that. I think we just before the cast started, we were talking about this being a bit of an age-old problem. Historically, when we run into issues in business, the default is to blame the
Yeah.
worker,
The finger pointing.
right? And we're seeing this all over the time. I have conversations, debates with friends, with colleagues, and we hear this often. Oh, there's no loyalty. There's no
Yeah.
people accept
Yeah.
a job, and all of a sudden they're still looking for other work.
Well,
Well, how is that a problem? That's a choice. That's good,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Wouldn't you want to be able to look for other work if what
Yes.
you were doing
Yeah.
right now wasn't meaningful enough or didn't pay enough or didn't like? Good.
They don't inherently owe us anything just
No.
because we've given them a job. And I think that's the way I'm perhaps being a little over the top about this. The way that it's been, it's like, oh, how lucky you are to come in and work for us. I think it's the difference is we want you. We're lucky that you're coming.
That you're
to us.
choosing us rather
Choosing
than us giving you a
Yeah,
job, right? Like,
yeah.
And there's
Oh.
there are these awards of employers of choice.
Yes.
The idea being that people would want to work there, choose to work there,
Yeah.
leave the place where they're feeling the paternalistic, I gave you a job, you should be grateful, to I want to work there because of these markers, whatever they might be.
they
And
are.
I would posit that that has to do with your workplace culture to
Yes.
a large extent. And when we talk about workplace culture, it's about how we relate to each other, but it's about so much more, right?
Yeah.
It's about meaningful work. It's about employers dealing with conflict in an appropriate way so it doesn't become toxic. It's about having a great team to work on. It's about feeling the connection between your work and what you find meaningful in the world. And if you're in one of these industries that's struggling with vacancies, you should be asking yourself, why would somebody choose to work here? What am I doing to create the kind of environment that somebody would say, hey, I want to work at that fast food restaurant because it looks fun. And those people have a good time and they make people happy when they come through the drive-through.
I need a summer job, or
And I
I
need a
need to
summer
work.
so you could say to yourself, well, I could work in a fast food restaurant and make minimum wage and I can't pay my bills. And so you might say, let's say you have to provide for people and you're responsible for your rent and things like, well, I'm not going to go there because I can't pay my bills. And then there's the summer students and the people who don't need to support themselves and a family. They just need to make some money. Well, let's say, well, okay, I could work at a coffee shop. That's kind of cool and hip and enjoyable to work at. I could work at a fast food restaurant. That fast food restaurant better be working hard to make it really enjoyable and fun
Yeah.
to work there and
Yeah.
meaningful in
Yeah.
some sort of way, right? Because people have choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I do think, we talked about we're such a great place to work in that process of inviting people in. Chris, I think it's both, right? We want to be a great place to work.
Of
We
course.
want to stand on that and be proud of that. And part of joining this culture, this workplace, is we are inviting people in when we
Yes.
hire people. And we want to be clear that, yeah, it actually is a privilege to
Yeah.
work here. It's a privilege to work with this great group of individuals.
Yeah.
I feel that every day, and we want you to come in with that kind of receptivity to, yes,
And we care about you more than as a worker here. We care about
Yeah.
you
As
as
a
a whole
person.
person. And if what that means for you is someday you're going to make a choice to work somewhere else because it furthers the thing that you care about most, because you need to make more money to support your family, whatever, we're going to send you out with a celebration because you're making
Yes.
the right step for you. So we don't get possessive about that.
Yeah.
We still see the element of choice
Sure.
for people.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier, Wendy, the idea of it's a reciprocal piece. I think I agree with you on that. That it is a privilege to come and work here. We are proud of who we are, but it's also you're choosing to come in to work here too. We need to respect that. I had a call just this morning with an acquaintance that I've informally coaching, and the experience they are having in their workplace is it's brutal, quite frankly, as far as how they're being kicked around, not physically, but
Right.
but emotionally. And and I'm not saying that I'm sure there's some challenges there, but it's almost once there's this historical, once the worker's in, they just need to get in line and do things the way we do things. And if it falls out of step, they're the problem. No, it is reciprocal. I think we want to be an employer of choice, and we also need to recognize that they're making a choice to come in and
Agreed.
value
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I think
And we want employees of choice as well, right?
I like that. Employees
Yeah.
of choice. Yeah.
Right. Choices all around.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay, let's get real.
Sure.
Let's get actionable. Let's think about people listening to the show right now. Let's think about ourselves, and let's ask the question. So, you've got some vacancies. How do
Yeah.
you fill them? What are you doing practically as a workplace to become attractive enough that you're going to see applications for those vacancies? Because what I'm hearing
Yep.
us say is there's people out there. There are people that want to work.
Right.
Okay, so what do we do?
Well,
Go, Wendy.
I'm thinking about the framework, Chris, that
Mm-hmm.
you introduced in our last podcast about, and this is looking at your staff, the people, on your team
Mm-hmm.
in 3 categories. Are they preferred? Are they passable, or are they poor? Preferred being knowing what you know now, would you hire them again?
Mm-hmm.
Passable, yep, they're doing okay. Poor, no, I'm not really satisfied with where
Yeah.
things are at. As a very basic framework, we can turn that the other way around and look at us as an organization.
Right.
If we asked our staff, would they say we're preferred? Knowing what they know now,
Would they have
Would
chosen
they
to work?
consider-
would
yes.
they have chosen
I like that.
to stay? Are
sure.
they, or are we passable? Yeah, we're doing okay. But if something better came up, they might be looking, just
Yeah.
kind of under the radar, keeping their eyes and their options open. Or are we actually really in a place where people might be staying, they might be disengaged, they're doing as
Sure.
much as they can to get through, but they're really hoping that there is something better in their future.
Okay, I'm an employer. How can I find out? How do I know if I'm preferred, passable, or poor? Like, do I just guess? Do I go, hey, Scott, do you like working here? Or is it more
Should we ask Scott?
complicated?
I think,
Scott's our
I do
video.
think
Scott doesn't
so.
have
I
a
mean,
mic.
I think you're saying that facetiously,
Yeah, I
right?
am
But
a
I
little
do
bit,
think
but
we
I-
should internalize it. Like, we should reflect on what are we personally doing to create a preferred workplace. I don't think it stops there, but I think it starts with us being attenuated to that actually matters.
Maybe we have employees assess our workplace
Yes.
performance. Think about
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I love where you're going with this,
Us.
Wendy.
The
Yeah.
performance of our
Yeah.
workplace. Yeah,
So we talk about performance evaluations. How
Yeah.
about the employees do an evaluation on the workplace performance, if you will, meaning that the health of the culture is really where I'm going with this.
Mm-hmm.
And ask them, I think, is really what it comes down to. Eric said, how do we know? I agree, Wendy. I think in many cases we know. Let's be honest. We've all been leaders for a number of years. There are times when you're like, oh yeah, I really need to deal with that. And we don't.
Mhm.
So I think when we, as whether we're business owners, we're managers, if we know there are things that need tending to, tend to them. Or just know you're going to continue to have this problem. That's one. But also, so this is stuff talk.
Okay.
How would they say, like you said, knowing what I know now, would I apply for this job again? And if the answer is no, okay, what would need to look different?
And okay,
Yeah.
I don't think that if I went to every single person in this organization, the 28 employees,
Yeah.
the 130 trainers and contractors, and I asked each of them, knowing what you know now, would you apply?
Sure.
Or would you go, I'm not sure? Or would you say no? I don't think they're going to want to have that conversation
No,
with
I
me
don't.
as the CEO of the organization, right? That's
Yeah.
that's a little awkward.
Sure.
Maybe.
You'd have
I
to
mean,
have
some would be
tons of
fine.
psychological
Absolutely.
safety.
Many would
Yeah.
probably be fine, but I don't know. Like if I've worked for people before, I just would find that hard.
Unnerving.
Yeah. Oh, I
Unnerving,
agree.
Yeah,
right? Like,
I
I don't
agree.
So-
disagree with this. I want to let's dig in on this.
You
though.
do or you don't agree?
I don't disagree,
Oh,
but I want to
okay.
dig in on this.
Yeah.
You're right. You've
Yeah.
had leaders in the past, and you would find it unnerving. What we're talking about here in this conversation is really shifting everything. Right? I agree. If Eric, if you walked around today and just started asking people, would you hire again? Odds are most people say, yeah, I would.
yeah.
But are we okay with the fact that people would feel they couldn't answer directly? Maybe there are some things that we need to tend to, right?
I would want people to be able to
know you would.
answer honestly, and I would want to do something about that. But despite my best intentions
Yes.
and despite wanting that,
Yeah.
we live in a milieu
Uh-huh.
where we've been told, don't ever let your employer
course.
know what you're really thinking.
Yeah.
And we've had people
Yeah.
quit. I remember somebody who quit several years ago
Yeah.
who gave us 2 weeks notice, they were a great employee. They were wonderful to work with.
Sure.
And they wanted to go on to do something that was related to their degree. That was awesome. And I'm so happy that
Right.
that person quit and did that. But the reason they said they didn't give the 2 week, they only gave 2 weeks notice and not longer, is they were they were worried about what might happen if they told us in advance. I felt so sad about that
Sure.
because I wanted to be able to support that person to go somewhere else. And I don't think we did anything wrong.
Yep.
They get messages from watching TV. I get messages from watching TV and movies. We get messages from our friends. And this person's friends told her, don't say anything.
Yeah,
So she was
absolutely.
thinking
Yes.
about saying
Yeah.
something, but her friend said, don't say anything.
Yeah.
It's too dangerous.
Yeah.
Like, oh, come on.
Yeah, I think the whole work world is conditioned in that way.
Sure.
And so we may want to be working towards changing that kind of perception by staff, by the people who we work with. But there's a long legacy
There's a huge legacy.
historically,
Oh,
and
100%.
also from their experience with past employers, past workplaces
Yes.
that have reinforced that message.
I don't disagree with that at all. But that doesn't mean that's an excuse not to create a work environment where people
No.
can come
Well,
in.
right.
Right?
You're
I think this is what
right.
we're
You're right.
striving
We're
for.
building. We're
Yeah.
building
Right.
this.
Yeah, so that is true. Yeah, go ahead.
There's the cynical side of me, not cynical, but there's like the practical side of me that says, we have to work exactly to what you're saying,
Yeah.
Chris. Totally agree. We're never going to be perfect there.
Yeah, of course.
And I think sometimes it's important for people to be able to speak confidentially.
Yes, I do.
Like
agree,
through
yeah.
the form
Yeah.
of an assessment.
Right.
You know,
Agreed.
I know that both you and
Yeah.
Wendy do a fair amount of work with organizations around cultural assessment and giving people a place to have voice and talk about their experiences. One of the questions, though, that I wonder what would happen is if we just had a one question survey. This is an out.
Yeah.
I wonder. Preferred, passable, poor. Just
Yeah.
a simple question.
Yeah.
Where are we at? Pulse check. I mean, there's many other things and nuances. Now, if people were saying passable or poor, I'd want to know why. Like, where are we falling
Yes,
down?
yeah,
Obviously, there's lots
yeah.
of other questions there, but
But that's a good start.
that would
Yeah.
be a good
That's
start.
pretty
And anybody
straightforward.
could do that. Create a doodle poll,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
some sort of poll, and send it out, and it's confidential, and people could just say. And you could go as an employer. Oh, look, only 50% of the people said we're preferred.
Yeah.
We got some work to do.
Yeah, I like this. And I think if we go back, we were talking historical, we talk about various industries or organizations. We're just talking, how much have we heard organizations really doing that? Whether it's a construction company, a manufacturing company, a tech company, really doing that self-reflection. Are we a preferred employee truly? I don't
Yeah.
think we historically have done. Some have. I mean, I don't want to dismiss. I know there's some great organizations. I think in general, we haven't done that, right? And I said it's been kind of, when
Yeah.
we've run into issues, again, we've put the issue on it's we can't find good people. I'm still struggling with this whole concept because
Yeah.
I meet good people
All the
every
time.
day.
All the time.
And I think people are actually, we're getting better as people.
As
We're more understanding.
Yeah.
Like there's so much good going on. And I think I know, Wendy, you and I have used this term many times. We need to reinvent
Mm-hmm.
the workplace. I think this is what we're really talking about. If we really want to get through this, it's going to take it. Because this comes back to choice. People have choice. And they should. We're seeing that reflected in their engagement numbers. I think one of the things, so we need to be reflecting on, are we an employer of choice? That's one. But what about who we're bringing in? Wendy, you brought this up earlier around, let's think about the requirements. Who are we asking for? Who are we looking for? I think we really need to think about that. One of the programs we offer around hiring strategies, we talk about what are like truly bona fide job requirements.
Right.
Right.
Like, what are you really looking for? Just go back to that coffee shop example. If there's even a reference of the need for a degree, yank that off of your
Yes.
even if it's preferred.
Silly.
And I'm not diminishing
Well,
a
and
degree. Get a degree. That's awesome. I want people to go out
Yes.
and do that. What does the job really need? And if it doesn't, if it's not a bona fide requirement, pull that off.
Yeah.
Because people will not apply, and you're going to be missing out on some really qualified candidates. What do you need from these people specifically? But more importantly, what sort of aptitudes and talents do you need? That opens it
yeah.
up.
And experience as well. I
Right.
think, yes, you can train people, but one of the things you can look for is experience. And whether that experience is in living out the values
Yeah.
that we have,
Yeah.
or the actual experience in the job. I mean, the best predictor of future performance is past performance, right?
I don't know that it is. The best predictor of performance is actually seeing someone perform. That is actually the number one. I think the bigger predictor of performance, and there's some data on this, I don't think experience is it. I don't think experience is it.
But experience in how they work, even living out the values. Yeah, right?
In what, once they're in there, you're talking about.
No, like if you look at past performance of individuals
In a different organization.
in a different organization,
Okay.
I still think that their performance, and you said in our last podcast, we talked about the idea that performance is everything.
Sure is, yeah.
So
I see. Yeah.
past performance, I think, is indicative of future performance. It doesn't mean you can't build
No, I hear you.
ability, capacity, align people more with the values in terms of how we live them out. But
I hear you. I hear you. I will say, though, that's past performance in a different organization and a different culture.
It's a different
That's
garden.
true. Very true.
To use the metaphor, what conditions are you creating?
Yeah.
Somebody might have felt compelled to hide information in a previous organization because they
For
were afraid
different
of
reasons.
repercussions. And so we could say, well, it looks like they hide things. But we have to understand the context of that behavior and see, and yet we develop patterns as human beings. And if my pattern is one of sitting back and doing as little as possible, and I've done that for 15 or 20 years, it might be hard for me to change that, even if the
In a
environment changes.
fast-paced work
So
environment.
there's a dance.
It is,
Absolutely.
it is.
And I want to be clear. I don't disagree that experience is an indicator. It absolutely is. I was probably a bit strong on my thoughts on this. I do think, though, a bigger predictor of success are those talents and aptitudes. You could bring somebody in
I
with
agree.
very low experience relative to what they're going to do, but let's just say, I'm looking out at our front desk right here, right? What would be a great, aptitude or a talent that would really lead to success there, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about when someone comes walking into our organization, someone that is just is open, it's like, good to see you, welcome,
Genuine.
right?
Yeah.
Someone that does that, we can skill them up on what is happening behind the desk.
Yes.
But if that's not something that's a natural talent of theirs, is just kind of welcoming people in, probably not going to do a great job. You might put someone in there that actually finds it incredibly meaningful because they get to talk to someone you knew every day multiple times. That could light them up. So I think aptitudes, talents, those are really what we want to be looking for in our job description. So get out of have experience and education on your list
that are required.
that
really
are
help.
truly
Yes.
required. What are the aptitudes and talents that are necessary?
Yeah, I work in a hospital, let's say, and I need to hire a doctor. They've got to have that. They've
Please.
got to have that certification. They've got to have the requisite
And I agree with the experience,
experience, right?
particularly there. Yes.
Yeah.
It's very,
My
very,
dentist, please.
very, very important. We want that to be there. And yet, even in those situations, am I a hospital of choice to work at?
Right.
Right.
Do I
yes.
give people agency and support? Do I make connections between their work and doing good in the world?
Yeah.
Do I help the teams function at their best?
Yeah.
Do I look for the resources needed for the team to work well? Like, there's so many things. So 2 hospitals that require the exact same person and have the exact same vacancy might get very different results depending on the workplace culture.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I think we need to talk about here is what are the things that you can do? Okay, you work in construction, you work in healthcare, retail, whatever. It doesn't really matter. You're competing for the same pool of people out there who want jobs.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that came into my mind ahead of this podcast was there's some big initiatives out there in the world that people are focusing on. People are focusing on DE&I, diversity.
Yeah.
What is it?
Equity.
Equity, inclusion. DEI, people are focusing on becoming B corporations, which is a beneficial corporation. So these are some sort of big social markers that some employers are working on. Do those things make a difference? So what do you think? Should we be thinking about those as employers? Is that going to attract people?
Well, I think one of the things we know and the data supports is as humans, we're purpose driven.
Yeah.
Right. So I think and again, I think this is why we're seeing a reflection in an uptick in engagement is that people are finding trying to connect with something that's meaningful or purposeful for them. So I think we do need to think about that as organizations, as far as what difference are we making in the world, and then hire for people that are aligned with that. I think that is it. I one of the things, though, often when those conversations come up, it's like, oh, well, we're this as an organization. There's still purpose within whatever you're doing as an organization. And like I said, you might have an environment that could be lend itself really, really well to a certain skill that someone finds really, really meaningful. Someone that's a problem solver working in an organization that's filled with problems, that could actually be meaningful work for them. So I agree. I think we want to be thinking about who we are as an organization, what difference we're making in the world. I think that's important. People are purpose driven. So what's the point in me coming to work here?
Right.
And I think you mentioned skilled labor, unskilled labor before. I think both are still humans that are purpose driven, and there's purpose to the work. I think we need to connect people with that.
So do you want to talk about B Corp and DE&I?
Yeah, sure.
Like, I mean, you know a lot more about B Corp. I know a very little bit.
Right.
It sounds like an incredibly valuable thing to have as certification. But are there ways to communicate and build that kind of organization without that certification would be my big question.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I know it's very costly. But I do think that people are looking at organizations and the expectations are changing around things like sustainability.
Yep.
I want to work for an organization that's good for people and good for our planet.
Yep.
And B Corp certification gives that. But are there other ways that we could communicate that? And I do think, I mean, it's complicated because I also think there's a lot of cynicism to, and this greenwashing, right? Where we'll say we do all of these great things in terms of, sustainability, but it's used more as a marketing ploy as opposed to a real, authentic, this is what we believe in.
Right. So to be clear for our listeners who haven't maybe looked into or heard of B Corp stands for Beneficial Corporation. Right. And it's a marker you can get through a nonprofit, independent agency that certifies your organization. And typically they're working with for-profit organizations, but I suppose they might work with nonprofits. I'm not 100% sure on that. But they're looking at things like social sustainability, environmental performance standards, accountability standards for governance and leadership, and transparency to the public about their score. So there's a scoring mechanism. You have to score 80 out of maybe 100, something like that, in order to get this certification. And the intent is to help business become regenerative so that it's creating a better world rather than taking. Right. And so, I mean, you talk about greenwashing, Wendy. I don't see B Corp as greenwashing.
No, I don't either.
Right?
But I'm saying there's cynicism in the outside world. People
Right.
looking at organizations. And B Corp actually is a verified certification.
That's a verifiable way of doing it rather than saying, hey, we're great for the planet. Actually, we can verify that because of this.
Right.
So I bring that up because I was at a presentation last week where there were several industry leaders talking about becoming B Corp certified and the rationale for doing it. And one person said very clearly, for us, it was about attracting and retaining talent. Because we're finding the people that are just coming out of high school and university, that matters so much to them. If they can go to a place that's beneficial, they're worried about the state of the world. They're worried about climate change. They're worried about forest deforestation, all of these things. We want to attract those people. So we want to assure them that we take this seriously. We're monitoring ourselves on a yearly basis. We're paying attention to these markers. So I think it might make a difference sort of, especially as you get bigger as an organization, as you start to think about, we have to attract a certain number of people every year. We're going to universities, we're going to job fairs, we're going to these other places. If you can say, we're a beneficial corporation, and the one next door isn't, my guess is it probably makes some difference for some people.
Yeah.
I
think so. I think the underlying piece to that, because I think one of the things we see this often in organizations where it's a top employer, and you have the certification, and then you actually get into the organization, employees are struggling, they're not doing well, but we've got the top employer piece.
And they actually paid to get that, or be considered.
And I'm not saying that to diminish the B Corp rating, but what I'm getting at is I think the underpinning is, if you want to be successful as an organization, you need to care. I'm going to just put it that way, whether it's you care about your employees, you care about your products, you care about the environment in which you work in. So I think that's the shift that we're seeing in society, quite frankly.
Yeah.
You need to
It
care.
matters.
Yeah.
You need to care about your community. It's different to different people. So that's what I'm getting at. Whether your sustainability is where you're at, people want to work for an organization that actually cares.
Yes.
And you could be in oil and gas, or you can be in renewable energy. You can still be an organization that cares about the people you work with, who you're doing the work for, and what the difference you're making in the world. I think that is really what it comes down
Yeah.
to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those certifications matter. But if you really aren't living it, and I think this goes back to your point, Wendy, about values and how you're operating, the last thing you want to do is claim to be something, and then people come and have a different experience.
Yes.
Right? I think that's important. I think care is the underpinning.
Yeah, and that list that you read through or talked through, Eric, those factors that the B Corp certification is looking at, all organizations can pay attention to those.
We all can.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, for sure. Okay, beyond that, let's move beyond that now. Let's talk about, I'm an employer with 10 people. Maybe I'm a manager in a larger organization. I'm responsible for a bunch of people. I'd like to attract and retain wonderful people to work with. What other things should we be doing? We talked about meaningful work. We've talked about being a beneficial place to work.
Diversity you mentioned as well.
DE&I. So
Creating belonging is, there's a new way of phrasing it. Diversity, equity, inclusion, or creating belonging is really
Right.
what it's about. Welcoming, being a welcoming place for everyone, regardless of what those, your ethnic background, your religious background, your gender identity, that's what that's about. And organizations here too, just like greenwashing, they can say they're a welcoming organization, but the reality might not always match. I mean, and it should. And I think we need diversity on our teams in our organizations to be agile, to innovate, to actually make good decisions.
Yeah. I think the word you're saying there, that I think that really resonates with me is belonging. Because I agree, diversity leads to that. But if we don't have inclusion, diversity is actually just a recipe for stress and disagreement. So we need that inclusion. It's that belonging. I think maybe, Eric, you're saying what? I think that's what it is. We need organizations that are hiring people that are aligned, right, with what we're doing, the difference we're making in the world, feel that they belong, right, and meet their needs to the extent possible. And it's generally when we're in that environment as humans, we generally don't want to leave that environment. Now, we might for other reasons, which is okay. We want to be able to support that. I think one of the things so I agree, belonging is key, that if people feel they belong, then they're generally going to want to stick around. But I think this is in keeping with reinventing organization, the idea of the workplace. When organizations are struggling, because it is true, there are certain industries where people are struggling because labor costs are going up.
Yeah.
And it's making their business model perhaps not sustainable. That is a reality. Here's one of the things I encourage people to do, though. I love the mind of an entrepreneur. I've many in my social network, and the successful entrepreneurs just think of things just a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Right? And I just love it. I'm just so intrigued by that. I'm envious, to be honest with you. But they're innovators.
Mm-hmm.
So anyone that I know is a business owner, they thought up something different and made it. The ones that are successful are thriving. Some of them are getting comfortable now. And they're like, oh, yeah, but I can't do this because minimum wage is too high. Can't? Or are you not rethinking?
Or you're not. You're not.
I don't want to diminish the challenge, but that's a reality. Wage has gone up. It has to, if we want people to do okay, if we actually care about the people in our society. How can we do this differently and still make it successful? I believe there is a solution. I don't know what the answer is, but I believe you can. I think instead of just looking outward and laying blame on, well, it's the government, it's this, and those are contributing factors for sure. What can you do? And I think there's more. I think we have more option
we can
than
either
just blaming the prime minister.
we can either, right. We can become complacent
Yeah.
and just say, well, this is the way it is.
My hands are
And
tied.
so,
My hands are tied.
let's just do our work and get it done. Or we can ask a better question, even if we don't have the answer to it.
What can I do?
What
can I
what
do?
could we do?
Yeah, given
What
this
other
reality,
options do we have?
given
And then
this
bring
reality.
everybody in
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
create that new, whatever that is.
Yeah.
That's where I think diversity also comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know?
sure. Like different ways of thinking. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So demonstrate care for people. Demonstrate care for the community, the environment, whatever you
Yes.
want to call that. Care for people, care for the community. That's the foundation of creating an attractive workplace.
Mm-hmm.
Care for people, care for the environment. You're going to start to attract people. When you care for people, you're going to think about the environment internally.
Right.
You're going to
Right.
say, do people have work that is good for them, right? That is good
Yeah.
for the team that they're in. Do we have ways that people feel connected to meaning and purpose? Do we have a way of keeping our workplace culture healthy and dealing with conflict in healthy ways? Do we have a leadership team that places emphasis on people, perhaps over profits?
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Do we have a leadership team and others who are saying, we're going to do our best when we bring a diverse set of minds to the table to
Yeah.
work together? These are things that we can do internally, right? Demonstrate care for people, for community, and then internally, what's the environment or what's the workplace
Yeah.
culture that people find themselves in that they're going to want to stay a part of?
Yeah.
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 I-
Go ahead, Chris.
I think, Wendy, I just want to go back to your point earlier about, are we assessing our environment
Yeah.
like in that preferred way? I think that leads to your point, Eric. I think when we are seeing issues as organizations, maybe it's turnovers increasing. It's easy to say, oh, what's the next generation of work? They're not committed. They're not this. They're not that. When we see turnover increase, it is almost always, actually, I'm going to say it is always culture related to some degree.
I agree.
And I think that is it. We need to stop pretending that's the case. There are things that we need to address here. If we're seeing those markers, we need to go up and take a look at the culture that's at play. And if we don't, if we aren't self-assessing, we're at risk of doing that. I just, as you were talking, Eric, I was thinking about two different business owners that I know in two different industries. One is manufacturing, and one is in finance and in insurance side of business. Both of these organizations have little to no turnover
Yes.
in industries that are claiming high turnover. Both of these owners and leadership teams focus on culture
Yes.
with like and with intensity and really above all else.
Yeah.
And they happen to be incredibly profitable at the same time.
Nice.
But their primary focus is culture. And like I said, in particular, this manufacturing organizations here in the city, almost no turnover. And you could sit at a table with a bunch of manufacturing companies and say, oh, we're really struggling with talent.
Mm-hmm.
But the one that's really focused on culture isn't. So I just think it comes
love
down
it.
to, are you assessing how you're doing?
Yeah, and I think that assessment piece, we touched on that
Yeah.
earlier. There are more and more clients that we are experiencing that are wanting the assessment. They have a good culture, but they want to continue
Yeah.
to pay attention.
Yeah.
They want to keep
And
it that way,
They
right?
want to keep it that way. And in those industries, I'm thinking about very specific clients who work in, manufacturing, construction, retail, hospitality. They are looking to assess their culture, and they're also building the skills within their team to do their jobs well. We talked about the skill differentiation. And they're also, as best as they can, trying to take pay off the table. Like, that's not the deciding factor. We're going to pay fairly. We want to remove that from people's
Yeah.
consideration. We're going to upskill people to the best of our ability and their ability, and we're going to create a great culture.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are,
Yeah.
three real areas that address
Yes.
the labor vacancy.
Yeah.
little bit,
Pay
yeah.
people enough. We didn't
Yeah.
really talk about paying people enough, but man, that's so important, right? So important. Okay, let's get to rants and raves, shall we?
Sure.
We've got some rants and raves today. I'm going to start it off today
Sure.
with a bit of a rant.
Yep.
I was having breakfast with some friends the other day, and we were talking about work, how we were doing, and one of my friends said, "Not doing great." couple days ago, my company that I work for, large company, sent a message out by email to all of the directors and VPs and et cetera, the upper management or somewhat upper level anyway, said, there's a meeting, less than an hour, 45 minutes away, be there. Of course, you can imagine if you receive that, how you might feel. Anxiety.
Yes.
They get to the meeting, it's an all hands meeting, and basically an announcement that 4 senior level leaders, I suppose VPs, were being let go because there was no longer work for them. And my friend left that meeting thinking to themselves, that was weird. I know that there are 2 VP vacancies being posted within our organization right now. And I know that from what I've seen of the 4 that were surplus, they no longer had jobs, they were good people, smart, talented, and they're just gone. And I don't understand it. And then he said, and then I just felt so stressed that I just couldn't work the rest of the day, and I had to go home and take a sick day.
Oh.
I just think there's got to be a better way. What?
Well,
I don't, yeah,
that's very sad.
so sad.
And you think about the historical legacy that's being created or reinforced. Those individuals will move to potentially a new place of work, and then their CEO is going to come and ask them, are we a preferred, a passable, or a poor place to work? And they're going to go, I'm not going to tell the truth, right? I don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
Right.
That's
That's
so
it's
unfortunate.
Really unfortunate is the word I was thinking of as well. And I think to your point, Eric, it just has to be a better way.
Yeah.
I think I understand changes have to happen with organizations.
Yeah.
I'm even going to question the decision that was made in that organization because I don't know the background. But how you go about communicating that decision, caring for the people that are there and the people that are leaving, there can be a better way. I think that lines up to everything that we're talking about.
Yeah, and you know, for my friend, they were left wondering, am I next? Who's next?
Right.
Is there going to be around a layup? There just wasn't enough information even to understand the context of the decision. And then also just like these glaring, well, these were great people, and there's 2 vacancies at the same level right now posted within the organization. Now, you're right, Chris, there might have been something going on at the upper levels or with these people that wasn't communicated, but that culture, which is reputed to have a fairly strong workplace culture, it's a massive corporation, fairly strong workplace culture. It took a hit that day.
Of course it did.
Significant hit. And so now all of those directors went home feeling stressed.
And
Guess
that
how that's
ripples.
going to impact the way they talk about the teams, the trust they have in upper leadership, the way they talk to the people that they're leading is going to impact.
Yeah, no, I'm sure your friend was contemplating their future there
I'm sure.
too.
And wondering, is there a place I can go that's more secure, that's more
Yes.
stable?
Yeah, that's a real shame.
Yeah.
And as much information as can be provided, as much context, so that this person isn't left with, all these question marks, and they start to fill in the blanks with whatever they make
Right.
up.
There's a default to saying nothing because we can't share. You can be honest with employees without sharing every last detail, but you need to share something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. That's my rant.
Yeah, we need
for
some
the
good
day.
news.
I have
We
some-
need some
I have
good
some
news.
good news.
Go
I have
ahead,
some
Wendy.
good news.
You've
So-
got a good rave going.
Well, and I spoke with a friend who had a very different experience, also linked to historical workplace from their vantage point. She was telling me about, I asked her how her new job was going, and she said, oh my goodness, it's just so fantastic. I'm really enjoying it. And I said, well, tell me a little bit about what are some of the markers for you of why you're assessing your workplace as being so good. And she said, well, I have a new manager, and the other day I was walking through the hallway and they stopped me and said, you look like you're a little distressed. And she said, I was thinking about how to approach a colleague about an issue that had happened earlier in the day. And she said, I didn't quite know how to do it in a way that was helpful. And my manager said, come on in, sit down. And so she said, are you sure you want to hear this? And the manager said, yeah, I'm there to support you. And they had a very fruitful coaching conversation. And she said, in my former place of work, if ever I brought up, I learned very quickly, she said, not to ever bring up any issues that weren't about getting a job done. Because my manager was, you fix it, you do it, you get it done. Any interpersonal issues, that's on you, you figure it out. She said, in my new place of work, I'm realizing that my manager actually cares about issues beyond just getting the work done. And actually, the conflict that this individual was dealing with had to do with getting the work done. It
Right.
impacted the work
Sure.
being done. And so my shout out to that manager is, you know what? Thank you for taking the time to listen
Yeah.
and to coach and to support and to recognize that
Mm.
people are dealing with all kinds of things and we need to be paying attention, asking questions, and then helping them think about their next steps.
Yeah, exactly. And if somebody's emotions are triggered, they're stressed, they're worried, they're upset, they're angry, fearful, whatever it is, it's going to impact their ability to do work. So if a
Yes.
manager A from the previous company who said, just get your work done, solve it, is missing half of the human equation. Yes, we need to be
Right.
rational problem solvers, but in order to do that, we also need to pay attention to our emotional experience because emotions lead us to action. And so a manager who recognizes the look of distress and says, hey, you want to talk a little bit? Maybe I can help you think about this, will actually help that person perform better in the long run by integrating the emotional experience with the practical, let's get stuff done. So anyway,
You're
awesome.
just highlighting the relevancy and importance of emotional intelligence in the
correct.
workplace.
Care.
Yeah.
We were talking about care
And
before.
care, yeah.
And listening to those two stories, isn't that interesting? That one individual was probably went home and was like, boy, I'm working for a great organization and felt confident and comfortable in where they were. Whereas your friend, Eric, was rethinking everything probably as
went home
related
feeling
to
sick.
work. And the only difference was care and consideration in a moment.
Yeah,
Wow.
cool.
I have to say, I'm going to go rant on this one.
All right, let's give us a rant, Chris.
This is particularly frustrating. And the rant is, we as leaders, as managers, let's just stop being tone deaf. There are moments we need to stop, pause, and really pay attention. I was talking with someone recently that was dealing with, there were some major issues happening in their organization. Some big changes had been, similar to your friend Eric, job loss had happened. And some major decisions were being made that were going to have a long-term effect on the organization. And this was a fairly senior position, had a concern with a decision that had been made. And it's like, I really need to talk to my leader, which is the right thing to do. I have a concern. This is what you want. You want an employee that's going to speak up, right? And share that, like, whoa, I don't know. And when they contacted their leader was out on a social engagement. They're out for lunch with some people. I'm not criticizing. There's nothing wrong with that. Took the call in the middle of the lunch and then said, what's going on? And I'm out for lunch with whoever. It was some group of friends. And then the person, I have a concern. And then started talking about it. And then was interrupted by a leader, said, hold on, I got to order my drink. And then just came back on, said, okay, what's going on? And just kind of cursory listened, and then they just moved on. And the person hung up the phone and said, I don't feel that I was heard at all. And I was just, and the decision steamrolled forward. Sure enough, there was pushback immediately as a result of this decision. And I think the point I'm making is, I'm not going to criticize the decision because I don't know it. But when an employee calls you,
Yeah,
and says, I have a concern. That's what I like to call it most like a critical moment.
right.
Yeah. Yes.
Stop. First of all, don't take the call if it's not a time to take
If
it.
you can't take the call, don't take it.
Don't
If you
answer
can't
it.
focus.
Yes,
That's number one. But when you make that decision too, and every decision we make has consequences, right? So now I've answered it, and the employee says, I have a concern. You need to stop and say, okay, give me a sec. I'm going to get to a quiet space. Let's talk about this. Right?
Yeah.
That is that is a moment that you can either get right or you can fumble it. And if you fumble it, the consequences are significant. So my rant is those critical moments. I have a concern. Whatever you're doing, pause. Make sure they feel heard, cared for, and listen to the concern and
Yeah.
respond with consideration.
Nice. And if there may be a situation where you realize when you take the call that this is bigger than you anticipated,
Yes.
acknowledge,
Right.
validate, and get back to them.
Yeah.
As in, thank you so much for calling, Sheila. I
Yeah.
really appreciate that. I can see this is really significant and important. I'm in the middle of something right now. I'm going to call you back in half an hour so I can really listen in. whatever it is, but make sure if you can't talk now that you give them a time when you can talk and you can set everything aside. Yeah, don't be tone deaf. Obviously, if they're calling you and expressing a concern,
Yeah.
I mean, one, often people don't call each other anymore. It's probably
that's right.
significant,
That
right?
already is a
Okay, so
sign,
this
yeah.
person's calling. Ooh, maybe this is significant,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Well, and there, I think responding with a question, that doesn't induce a binary response. Like,
Right.
do you need me to respond to you right now? Well, what is the employee going to? Well, no, I'll be okay. Let's talk in half an hour.
Right.
As opposed to asking a better question, like, I don't know what that might be right
Yeah.
now, but on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it that we have this conversation now? And if they say, well, this is an 8, well, then whether you're with a friend or a
right.
client,
Yeah.
that trumps.
Yeah. Without question. I think it's the moment someone says, I have a concern, it warrants some follow-up. Like you said,
Yes.
It
maybe
does.
now, but acknowledge it and validate. Anyway.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Whew. The leader's response, right? It's so
Yeah.
important, whether it's when you lay somebody off or whether it's, as you were talking about, Wendy, the leader's response to supporting people in the moment of stress, layoffs, I have a concern that I don't know how to deal with, or I'm making a call to you makes all the difference. Show care. This is what we're getting back to. You want to be an employer of choice. You want people to choose to work for you. You want to deal with your vacancies. Demonstrate care for people. Demonstrate care for your community. You're going to be a long ways along that journey.
Yeah. Right on.
Hey, it's time for us to wrap up and for Chris to give us a summary of what you've heard us talk about today and some actionable items to walk away with. So with that, we're going to turn it over to you, Chris, to walk us on out of here.
Labor shortage, that's not a thing. I mean, it can be, but it certainly isn't a thing now. I think we need a few key takeaways that I had from our session together here is, first, stop thinking it as a labor shortage. There isn't less people looking for work. Think of it as an issue of vacancy, right? So there is people out there, but they're for some reason not coming to work here. And what that requires us to do is to think about ourselves as, are we really an employer of choice? So are we a desirable place to come work? And what are we doing to ensure that people would choose us? So as Wendy mentioned, ask yourself the question, are we a preferred employer, or are we just passable, or even poor for that matter? So if we're poor or passable, what do we need to do to become preferred, an attractive place for people to come work? And the underpinning to that, of course, is this is really a matter of workplace culture. And it needs attention, right? It needs intention and attention, and it needs to be rooted fundamentally in care. Care for the employees, care for the work that's being done, care for the communities that you work in. So let's stop thinking about this as a labor shortage. It's a vacancy issue. And we need to ask ourselves, are we a place where people would want to come and fill those vacancies? And generally, if it is a place where people feel cared for and we're doing work that demonstrates our care for the people that we are serving or in the environments in which we're delivering it, we tend to become an employer of choice. So those are some three key takeaways from my perspective. I will say this, if you are thinking about, are we a preferred place of work, this is exactly what we like to do here at Achieve. This is what we're all about. We actually have a book called The Culture Question that Wendy and Eric both wrote together. We encourage you can get that on our website, theachievecenter.com. But we also do assessments specifically with this in mind with organizations. We love to work with organizations to learn about what's going well and what opportunities exist to make your workplace one of an employer that is preferred. So reach out to us if you have any questions about that. We love to stay connected with the listeners. Just a couple of things that are going on this summer coming up. On July 18th and July 19th, I will be hosting a leadership retreat out in Canmore, out in the Rockies. So for any leaders that are interested in, wanting to dive deep on, connecting with their leadership purpose and learning about putting that into action, I'd love to host you out there. It's going to be 2 very impactful days. So that's July 18th and 19th. We're also facilitating a leadership certificate program. Wendy and I are in August. It's all virtual. So I encourage you to go to our website, achievecenter.com. That's center, CENTRE.com for that and many other things. Listen, folks, thank you for taking time to listen in. It's always great to know that we do have listeners on the other side here. And so we encourage you to reach out to us, stay connected, let us know what you're enjoying about the cast. What would you like to hear more about? And just thanks for taking the time. We'll see you again next month. Take care.
Looking for free resources, training, and consulting in the areas of leadership and workplace culture? Be sure to check out achievecenter.com. That's achieve, CENTRE.com.